Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back to Love, Laughs, and Lessons. And we are in the Let's Talk About Sex series. And of course, we have another amazing guest on today. And I'm going to hand it over to Denise Ray, who is the co host here, to take over. Go for it.
Yeah, I am Denise Ray. And today we do have another truly fascinating guest with us, Jenn Wodtke. Jenn is an orgasm and pleasure coach on a mission to help women unlock profound self-worth, fulfillment, and empowerment through unapologetic connection to their pleasures and desires. As the creator of the pioneering Touchless Orgasm Method, Jenn introduces a groundbreaking approach that redefines intimacy by teaching women to access the limitless, limitless, yeah, pleasure that lies within them. Through her coaching, Jenn empowers clients to silence their inner critic, move from their mind to their body, and awaken an expanded, orgasmic. All
Or
right.
orgasmatic, whatever. Just,
I'm excited.
yeah.
So like even saying the words, I'm like, woo, capacity that resonates throughout every part of their lives. Jen's work goes beyond individual pleasures. It's about reclaiming personal power, especially for women who have been historically marginalized in their sexuality, spirituality, and professional lives. She believes that when women own their pleasure, they reconnect with a divine sense of agency, fueling personal growth and creating a ripple effect that affects every relationship and endeavor. So, no matter where a woman is on her journey, Jen's compassionate and transformative approach guides her towards deeper pleasure, personal power, and spiritual alignment. Jenn, thank you so much for being here. And like I said, I'm like so thrilled. So let's just dive in.
Thank you for having me. That's like the most beautiful introduction I've ever had. So thank you for that.
You're impressive. Like, tell, yeah, like, how do you do what you do?
Oh, my sort of break open moment was when I almost had an orgasm in a room full of 80 women at a retreat. And so that was an amazing experience. And I just needed like 10 more minutes in that room. We were being guided through this pleasure practice. So for me, that was the
Amazing.
moment.
Wait,
Yeah.
I'm just like, it's hitting me now. Amazing yet terrifying at the same time. Like
Yeah.
almost reaching orgasm in front of 80 people. That would be terrifying.
Well, they were, I mean, they were doing their own thing. So it wasn't like, I was on a stage or anything like that, but we were all together in this retreat, being guided through a pleasure practice. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And that kind of brought me back to touchless orgasm. I had had orgasms in my sleep in my early 20s.
Mhm.
And as I sort of, it took me many years to sort of get my official certification and take some really guided sexuality study. Um, and through the course of doing that, I just kept coming back to this orgasm that I had in my sleep and was convinced that there was like something I need to unlock, some secret. I was like, I know if my body can do this sleeping, like if my mind has the power to create this orgasm in my body while I'm sleeping with no touch, I'm like, I know that this can happen waking and conscious and directed. I just need to figure out how to do it. And
Mhm.
so it was in my most recent coaching training where I got my certification that I was in the retreat and we were doing various pleasure practices as part of our training, at home by ourselves. And I was like, okay, we're getting close. Like I'm finally in training that is really teaching about pleasure and it's not meant, well, I mean, the brain is always a part of it, but it's not intellectual, it's in the body. And I was like, okay, we're on the right path. And then, I'm in that room full of women. I'm like, yes, this is it. So I got home, and then the challenge was, okay, can I do this by myself, where I don't have the very supportive energy of like, 80 other women doing the same thing. I'm like, I need to be able to do this by myself. And so I began sort of experimenting, and I was like, yes, I can replicate this. And then I started sort of pulling out like what the components are that people need to be able to do to create this experience for themselves. And then I beta tested it and I was like, it can be taught. So that's how touchless orgasm was born and my journey with it.
Amazing.
Yeah. So now you are helping or you're supporting, guiding others
Yeah.
to reach touchless orgasms.
Yeah. I do. One thing I always want to say off the top is I think sometimes as women, when we hear sort of some new sexual element or idea, it can feel like, oh my God, this is one more thing as a woman I need to be able to perform. And I just want to sort of reassure everybody that that's not what this is. It is intended to be a system wherein you connect with yourself. And even if you don't want to go to like touchless orgasm, if that feels like a party trick and too much, that's totally fine. You can still reap the benefit of building the pleasure without orgasm, if that's your choice, inside of your body. And that really is amazing to take forward into partnered sex. Like once you have that awareness of your body and you've built sensitivity to your pleasure, like it's like I found in my personal experience, it's like a flip switch. It's a flip switch.
Tongue twist.
Once you open the window, it stays open, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
find it's so easy for me now to even just sitting here, to I'm doing it right now, like putting my awareness on my pussy and going, okay, like what is there right now for me in the morning? I've just woken up. I haven't had coffee yet, but it's like, okay, I can feel she's a little sleepy, but if I wanted to, like I can connect with that and I can build it and I can circulate it through my body for whatever I want. And like I said, it doesn't have to be orgasm, but it's possible for everybody. But it can just be to like give myself a little wake up in the morning or connect with whatever you believe in, the goddess, the divine, the universe, and just use that to fuel my life.
So I
I love,
appreciate you saying that
yeah.
because there's a lot of pressure around
Mhm.
reaching orgasm
Yep.
and feeling like you haven't really ultimately had the experience unless you reach right. There's this idea that you've got to reach orgasm. I hear it in my sessions so often. We
Yep.
put
Mhm.
pressure on ourselves, and there's such a beautiful journey from to reach orgasm. Don't necessarily need to reach orgasm. It can be good enough just to be in the pleasure state.
Yep.
And
Yep.
the
Sometimes the journey
flip
is enough.
side, yeah, of that is that people feel diminished, right? So because they're also reaching for this, and but then there's also a diminished feeling that they feel, right? You know, and to know that they don't have to feel that way. Just adding on to what, yeah,
Yeah.
that same
Yeah,
thought.
I almost think of it as it might be more accurate in some ways to call it like a pleasure meditation, like
Mhm.
because you're using your mind. You really, I mean, there's fundamentally the process is not complicated, right? It's you need your activated mind, you need sensitivity in your body to your pleasure, and then you bring in some pleasure building tools, right? So we use things like, breath work and moving energy and movement and um, working on sort of internally like squeezing the vagina to wake up the pelvic floor. But that's it, right? It's not a complicated process. So you can just set aside 10 minutes if you want, or even five, to just do it as a meditation to feel your pleasure instead of so many of us go through our day sort of numb to what's happening, not only in our pleasure, in our body. So even like I said, 5 minutes in the morning, I like to do 5 minutes in the morning, just like tune everything out, connect, look inward, and be like, what is alive? And that practice of connecting with your pleasure can help bring you out of numbness over time if you are somebody that does feel somewhat numbed inside of your body and inside of your pleasure. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be in a room full of 80 women. Like, it can be whatever works best for your life and your
Mhm.
personal sexual ecology.
And many of us are, as women, are walking around in a numb state because the rate of sexual assault and rape, I think it's 1 in 3, is significant. That's a lot of
Yeah,
people.
we don't live in a society that's sexually safe.
Yeah.
I mean, I got catcalled when I was like so young enough that it was scary. I've
Yeah.
had like all of us have. Every woman in our society has had some experience
Mhm.
that has been scary sexually. We are presented with such a narrow view of what female bodies should look like, which female bodies are worthy of being desired,
Mhm.
and all of that. And then on and on and on, right? Messages from the church, messages from your spirituality, religion, and friends, and the slut shaming that we see in movies, like all of that contributes to this society wherein women are really not allowed to not only sexually express, but they're not allowed to sexually feel everything that is available to them. And that is what creates this numbness. And what is so unfortunate is that, we do this numbing to keep safe, but we can't selectively numb. Everything gets numbed. And so when we're in a situation where we feel safe to become sexual, comfortable even with ourselves or with a partner, whatever it may be, we can't just unnumb. Like there's so much work that has to be done for us to be able to fully move into that pleasure. And that's where the crux of my work lies. It's like we need to get underneath whatever is happening in anyone's unique experience and unwind all of that conditioning
Mm-hmm.
and everything that we've put there that has created that numbness or that inability to be sexual out of fear, a lot of shame for a lot of people, that inner critic. Like there's so many different elements that come into play that we need to unwind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not like a light switch. There you go.
Well, I find it's a switch in the sense that once you can connect with that pleasure inside, like once you are able to do it just sitting without touching and find it, it's a switch in that you know how to do it. And then you can go back and you can work with it. It's not a switch in the sense of like, oh, now I'm all of a sudden having like mind-blowing orgasms all the time. It's a switch in that you can now find it and you can interact with it anytime you want. And
But
then
if
where
you
you
go
where you take it
from
is that
numb,
can be a process. Yeah.
that's the piece where I'm like, okay, if somebody's numb,
Yeah.
their expectation shouldn't be that it's just going to be a light
Yes.
switch. It's a journey. It's like a
Yes.
process of the
Yeah.
unraveling, like you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unwinding, not
Yeah.
unraveling, unwinding.
Yeah.
Or reawakening, right?
Yeah, reawakening, reclaiming, I think
Reclaiming.
sometimes
Yeah.
is another way to look at it. Yeah. So sort of getting back to the pleasure that we've lost over time.
So where
Yeah.
do you begin? Like if someone's listening right now and they're like, wow, I feel pretty numb.
I think the best and the easiest way to start at home, like I said, is carving out just 5 minutes. I recommend doing it morning and night before you get out of bed, before you go to sleep. And there's typically we're less stressed, so our mental resistance to the process is a little bit lowered, and our bodies are a little bit more relaxed, which can also help us access that pleasure. And then it really is just doing a little meditation, like closing your eyes, putting aside, all of the stresses and worries that we all have in our lives, and then just really putting awareness onto your genitals and just breathing and feeling what is there. And for people that are numb, they're not going to feel it the first time. But if you consistently do this practice, that 5 minutes a day, twice a day, you will start to find that pleasure. And then once you find that pleasure, you can visualize it expanding and growing. That's the pleasure building tool, is like seeing if you can breathe into it, if you can move it, and if you can let it become bigger. So,
I'm trying to do that right now.
And so am I.
Oh, good. I'm not
yeah.
the
Because
only one that's
Me
like,
too. Me
oh,
too.
I'm
I'm like,
gonna.
I can't help it.
I'm gonna try.
So, okay, I want to go back to bring the awareness to your genitals.
Yeah.
Be more descriptive. Like,
Yeah, I liken it to, when we on our daily basis get our brain tunes out so many physical sensations just because it has to, right? Like I'm not thinking about my shirt sitting on my skin until I think about it. Then I'm like, oh, I can feel the seam on my shoulder, right? So it's the
Mhm.
same idea that you need to tune in and really think about what is happening in your pussy. And if you're sleeping in panties or pajamas, like that can help sort of feel that sensation. Um, But it is really that simple. You just want to consciously think about what you are feeling, what is happening, what sensations are there.
So some say sensations that you hear commonly or frequently, what?
Um, Tingling, throbbing, hot, cold, champagne bubbles, contraction, expansion. Numbness is a sensation. So I really want to include that experience because I know it's so common, and just reminding everybody that that is a normal part of the journey. Um, but again, if you continue to just to put the awareness on and really feel it, you will eventually start to wake that numbness up.
And how do you know if you're on the right track? If there's nothing out there that's giving you the signal or sign that says this is reinforcing, this is a good idea, I should keep doing it. What do we hold like what's
I,
showing us? Yeah.
if if people are consistently not feeling anything, I would bring in light touch. Um, like I said, it doesn't have to be a completely touchless vacuum. And if you can't do it completely touches, you're a failure. You can bring in gentle touch. I find sometimes too, if we do things like stroking our hair, stroking our skin, we don't have to like go for the genitals if that numbness is there, but like sort of a gentle waking up of the skin. If you want to actually stroke the labia, the clitoris, you can combine those, right? So I would say continue with the awareness with no touch and then bring in touch and sort of alternate so your body can get used to touch and then stop. Can you still feel it?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Do people report that, they'll do this and they start to feel sensation and then they kind of get stuck where they're not progressing. They're like, okay, I can describe all of these sensations, but
And now I
there's
want
not an,
sex.
say it again.
And now what are you saying? Not progressing.
Like they're not like it's not starting to build. It's like, oh, I'm noticing these feelings or but then there's not movement towards like it doesn't feel pleasurable. It's just like an observation.
I haven't had anybody report that. And there's a wide variety of tools that we can use. So if something, and there will be something for most people, like not every tool works the best for every person, like we all have our preferences. So we would just move on to another tool, but I haven't had anybody get completely stuck and not see movement.
Oh, well, that's encouraging and
That is
promising.
encouraging. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm surprised by that, I guess, just because we've got like it's hard for a lot of people to
Yeah.
relax into.
Yeah. It's so individual too. So there are people who will need more time, definitely. Um, our pleasure is alive and it responds. This is, I think, one of the most beautiful things. It responds to practice, it responds to attention. So if people don't, and there will be days, like I have days too, like, being a pleasure and orgasm coach, like I still have days where it's like, meh, not much happening today. Like, I've got too much stress,
She's tired.
whatever.
She
Yeah.
Sleepy.
She just
she's
wants to
sleepy.
sleep. Sometimes she's angry. Like sometimes I get messages, and that's the other thing about, the wisdom. Sometimes like sometimes my pussy's angry and like wants wants to do other things. Like, but I find like the connecting with the pussy, connecting with the pleasure, like I found in my own personal experience, it opens to that wisdom. Like, and I've gone on dates, first dates from like Bumble or whatever, where I've walked in and pussy's like, nope, don't want to do anything with that guy. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
does she rule? It's like the end all be
Yeah.
all. Pussy says what is gonna
Yeah.
happen.
Pussy
Yeah.
wants.
I don't, I never override pussy, in my opinion.
Oh,
And I think,
I think
kind of zooming
I'm
out a little
done.
bit from the touchless orgasm.
so many thoughts right now. Okay,
I,
keep going.
Zooming out, that's where I think a lot of sort of lost feminine wisdom and goddess worship. We've lost goddess worship in our society as well.
Mhm.
And that I think it is that disconnection from pussy, from wisdom. Like female energy. Like when I was in that room, we also did a sex magic ritual in that room on that retreat, which was so great. There was something so magical about being in a room with female sexual energy that feels very much alive. And we have, as a society, we have lost women's ability to do this because they burned us at the stake for it, right? Like,
Right. Agreed.
and I've found connecting with women in group settings like that, I become, excuse me, I become much more aware of the signals my body is telling me and sort of the unconscious wisdom that is alive inside of me. I was meditating over a year ago. I used to work in film, lost my job, da, 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 meditating, and I got this like very clear message. I was doing a pleasure meditation. I got a very clear message like, it's time for you to move. There's nothing in this city anymore. So I find that's what I mean. That's an example of what I mean when I say, like, when we unlock our sexual energy and our sexual connection to this pleasure, we start to become empowered in all areas of our life. Because I truly believe that there is an innate wisdom inside of our sexuality, inside of our pleasure, that our
Mhm.
society in general, but especially women, have lost connection with.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so powerful, so grounding and knowing. And I think that's the other piece that because we're always looking outside of ourselves for answers. So being able to come back to self in this way is super, super powerful.
Yeah. And that sort of mirrors what the touchless orgasm system is. Like we typically look to external sources for pleasure, which are fun, and I'm not never suggesting we give them up, but we look to our vibrator or our hand or our partner's body for pleasure. And the shift is going in and connecting with what is already there, the abilities that we already have, just that most of us have lost connection to.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back to something you said a few minutes ago, which was, using a dating app, going on a date, and
Yeah.
pussy's like, oh, hell no, or hell yes. How do you tease out when it's the hell yes, where it's like, it's just a physical attraction? And like, is there the mind? Because we're matchmakers
Yeah.
and we're helping, coaching people and helping them make better choices, breaking patterns of behavior. And we're sometimes, if we're just sexually attracted to somebody, we're throwing caution to the wind and our frontal lobe out the window. How do you,
Yeah.
just going back to that, what you had said, wondering your thoughts given that?
It, yeah, I mean, if I get a hell yes, I mean, I continue the date. Um, and for me, I just ride it. I just ride that
Oh my
like
gosh.
lustful
My
just
mind just went. You just
I
ride it.
didn't mean it like that, although
Sorry.
well, true
Dirty.
as
That
well.
too.
Dr. Frankie, behave. Yeah, keep going.
I kind of just ride it until it either develops into something deeper where you have that, deeper love heart connection with someone, or sometimes you do earlier on go, this kind of is just physical because, you know, I don't like parts of their personality or we're not compatible as a couple or whatever. But I think it's like I said, you take that hell yeah, like so I don't know. Sometimes I feel like we don't get enough hell yeses in
Yeah.
dating and love. So if you
For
get a hell
sure.
yes, even if it's purely physical at the start, like you get on that train and you go until like you realize that your stop has come up and then you exit gracefully. And as soon as you realize that it's not working anymore,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds
But
like
there's
it's like
still a
embrace it.
balance. Yeah. But I think this awareness also puts you in balance, right? Because we always say balance your head and your heart. And so now we have to say balance your head and your heart and your pussy, to kind
Yeah.
of, there is this balance, So even if you have that hell yes, it's still in balance.
Yeah.
You're not going to make any rash decisions. I mean, if you can, if you want to, right?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure this is not an uncommon experience. I've gone on dates where I've had too much wine and then I can't, that numbs pussy's messages
Mm-hmm.
And here.
completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can't hear her anymore. The alcohol starts talking. Um,
Yeah.
so I've I've stopped doing that.
That's such a good
Amazing.
point.
Yeah. I mean,
Such a good point.
it's like flips the idea on its head that, like, oh, I need to get lubricated so that I can feel my pussy and feel relaxed and be excited. No, it's the opposite.
The
You get
opposite.
disconnected from your pussy.
Yeah.
You can't hear it when you're lubricated.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I find. Yeah.
And is that common, would
Yeah,
you say?
yeah, I think yeah, I think it's quite common. So,
So many people, if you think about it, how many people go on for drinks for their date?
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I found one or two glasses of wine is fine, but for me it's like and I found too through my own just the other thing I want to comment is that I talk about pleasure practices. Sometimes I also just rub one out. Like that's still totally valid. And one thing I've learned is that my tipping point is probably I can probably handle two, but after two alcoholic drinks, I can't orgasm at all. So, taking one, a glass of wine or splitting a bottle of wine, like over the course of an evening, if you're on a date, I think, that's lovely and wonderful and is a really great sensory experience if you're having a, lovely meal. But
Mhm.
too much, and it just, for me, it just turns off the ability to feel that pleasure. And then I'm making maybe not good decisions about whether or not I want to continue to see the person. So it's I find it's finding that sort of like balance, like you said, between having a good time and not going too far that you numb out what's happening in your pussy and basically override and sort of numb off all your pleasure receptors because there's too much alcohol or whatever in your system.
Mhm.
And as matchmakers, that's our rule too. It's like,
Yeah.
don't drink more than two.
Yeah.
Okay, one,
Yeah.
two.
And you just start saying dumb shit, thinking dumb shit. It's just like lay
Yeah.
off the alcohol. Yeah.
Yeah.
What makes this so powerful for creating this fulfillment? Like, what is it? What's the philosophy, if any, behind it?
I think what happened, in my own experience, what I've seen with clients as well, when you go in and start to work in your sexuality, like you, like you can't selectively numb. I find that you can't selectively unwind. Like all of your conditioning comes up. And I do also want to say, like, this isn't easy work, even though the touchless orgasm system that I mentioned is fairly straightforward,
Mhm.
where people kind of can find it challenging is like all of their beliefs come up. Um, and you start to really realize, do I really believe that, for example, it's a sin to have premarital sex? Do I really believe that? Or was that something that was implanted in me? Or do I really believe that my body is too big to be sexual, to be loved, to have orgasms? Or is that
Mhm.
something society taught me? And there's a plethora of beliefs that we
Yeah.
have. So the power comes from when we go in and we do all of that unwinding and all of looking at all of those beliefs, uh, just everything blossoms, everything sort of opens up. And for me, and I think it's a common experience from what I've seen from clients, it's really hard to work in your sexuality and not find some spirituality in there somewhere. And those paths often seem to be concurrent for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's just, I think my personal philosophy is that our pleasure is divine. Like we are given, especially as bodies, like women, we have a clitoris that's solely for pleasure. Like, how is it possible that we are not divine in our pleasure? Like, it just seems impossible to me. Um,
Right.
and so the more you sort of work in that sexuality, I find like so much self-knowledge comes out of that. I think our sexuality is a portal for transformation and it's a portal into our spirituality and into our divine. And that's what I think makes the work so, so incredibly powerful.
I just had a thought because it reminds me of Kundalini energy. And is it the same that you're talking about? Like this energy that develops and as you build, it circulates all throughout throughout the body and turns on all of the sensors. And you are so now in tune with everything that's going on and who you are and who you were meant to be, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
I'm not super, super well versed in Kundalini, but my understanding of it is that yes, it's a similar process, like
Yeah.
opening yourself up to that sexual energy and letting it move through you in whatever way it needs to, and
Mhm.
letting it turn you on and light you up as it goes. Yeah.
There's so many different, like in psychology, different theoretical orientations, different interventions, and there's a lot of overlap in them that we just use different words to label different interventions or skills
Yeah.
and tools. So I wondered too, as you were talking, I'm like, is this similar to Om or Tantra? Tantra is everywhere. I'm seeing it's like a
Yeah.
popular term now. So yeah, maybe.
My I'm not a tantrika. I'm not super well versed in it, although my training is based in the tantric and Taoist traditions in the sense that we do a lot of work in the body, and it's based on the belief that our sexual energy is life force energy, and we should all be enjoying and working with our life force energy. Yeah,
Yeah. So
totally.
there's a real, I wouldn't say spiritual, but a real internal component to it.
Yeah,
It's not about sex. And I
yeah,
think people should be really clear about that. I mean, it
yeah,
could be, but yeah.
yeah. Another funny moment that came up for me, inside of my training, I was doing my practices at home, and I can't- we, I think it was the, I was working with the primal. And so part of
What's that?
the primal sexuality, your primal shadow, perhaps, like that deep, unfettered uh lizard brain kind of almost.
Okay. Yeah.
So getting in touch with the primal. So I think there was some movement involved and whatever. And I was at one point on my knees doing this energy practice. And I was like, I've been having sex wrong. And this thought popped up. And I was like, wait, what? Like, wait, what? And so I finished my practice and then I thought about it. And for me, that's what happens when you're working with sexuality and in touch with your own wisdom and source is you get these messages. So it's like, what is that? I've been having sex wrong. I was like, I can't possibly have been having sex wrong my whole life. So I kind of took a moment to really let it sink in and what does that actually mean? And I think what I got out of that moment was I, as a woman, often defaulted to missionary sex a lot of the time. Um, and in this practice, I was on my knees, and there was something in it that really felt so powerful and so in control and so authentic that the thought, I've been having sex wrong, was more accurately, I need to be in control, more active instead of because I've probably up to that point, a majority of my sex life had been missionary or a variation on missionary. And it was like, I need to do less of that and let sex be something that is done to me almost, and have my sexual interactions be more where I'm more engaged, I'm more in control, I'm taking my pleasure where I want it, I'm using my pleasure as I want it. So that was a really interesting and powerful moment. And those moments are what I'm thinking of when I think sometimes when I say that sometimes it just something flips, is
Yeah.
you just get this like, okay, I got this. This makes sense. I got it. This is something that is true and real and in my life now. Yeah.
And it's not that it's that critical voice because we've got this voice, and some of us have committees of critical voices.
Yes.
So in that moment when you said
Yes.
that, I was like, oh, is that the critical voice just like criticizing the fact that you've done it one way all these years and now you're trying something else and it's wrong. You've been doing it wrong all along. Just
Yeah. No, it might have come out, it might have sounded that way, but it was actually a powerful guide into something better and bigger.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah,
Can
those
you
moments
can
make
you
me laugh.
share a client story, of course, anonymously, of what they came to you, what they were facing, and then where they ended up?
Yeah. So my client has said, I can use this in marketing. Um, she she had five one-on-one sessions with me, and she came to me because, and this is so common, she can orgasm during masturbation by herself, but not with her partner. So, one of I think the misconceptions in sex coaching is that we deal a lot with like the mechanics and technique, which we almost never ever do. So with her, we did a lot of that unwinding. And what she reported, what she has given me permission to share, she's like, in only 5 sessions, she's like, I'm getting closer. The gap between never orgasming with a partner, she's like, it's closed by about 80%. And I only have about 20% more to go until this actually happens for me, which blew my mind. Like, I'm this coach, I'm the coach, but like sometimes I come out of sessions and I'm like, I got as much out of that as the client did. And I'm so like, I'm still so not surprised, but like their successes still just like make me smile and light me up. And
Of course.
As they
yay,
should.
you're getting there, you
Yeah.
got there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was fantastic. And she's like, make sure and tell them it was only 5 sessions, which makes me laugh. But yeah, so that was a really good one.
What are some of the other things that people come to you with? I want the audience to like know that like, they're not alone and that
Mhm.
these are things that can be um
Yeah.
supported.
I often get it's often quite generalized. I have a lot of women who come and are like, I want to learn everything. Like I want to know it all. And whether what they mean when they say that is they're coming from essentially the culture that has turned off everything, right? So they feel kind of turned off and shut down across the board. So they want to do yoni egg work to see what that feels like, what that releases. They want to do touchless orgasm work so they can get into like a pleasure meditation inside of their body. And occasionally it is something more specific. Um, but I find more often than not, it's more of a generalized, like, I want to know what's out there. I want to experience my sexuality to the fullest. And sometimes they don't really have a specific goal other than like, I want to feel sexy. I want to have a better body image. I want to be more present. So it's,
And they can
yeah.
work on those areas by doing
Y-
work with you.
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I could imagine. Yeah, you wake up the goddess in a different way and you're just like oozing this kind of,
Yeah.
you know,
You feeling yourself.
you're feeling your exactly without feeling yourself
Right. Yeah.
Or you can
or feeling yourself.
Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. Like we also use direct touch pleasure practices as part of the learning. My one-on-one coaching is not necessarily touchless unless the client specifically wants that. We definitely use pleasure practices with direct stimulation to um, sort of to embed new learnings and new thought processes. So there's definitely touch inside of the coaching. So I don't want people to think I'm only touchless, not
Right.
by long shots.
Yeah.
I imagine too, just thinking about the brain and like, having that, sometimes you have to have some kind of stimulation to
Yeah.
then have the brain recognize, oh, that's what that stimulation feels like, that I can feel that sensation. And then you can mimic. You tell me
Yes.
you're the pro here, but you can then mimic that feeling without actually touching.
Yeah. And we use pleasure to create safety, right? 'Cause if
Mhm.
you don't feel sexually safe, none of this will take. So that's one of the initial things that we do is I teach clients how to feel sexually safe and they can bring in touch when that feels good to them. And we also use pleasure. One of my very, very favorite things, and this is live, this is up on my YouTube channel already. Going back to that inner critic is the shame gasm.
Oh,
Um, and I've been feeling
Shame,
my
gasm.
shame's popped up this past week specifically for something that's going on. So I did this just last week for myself. And it really is the idea that our pleasure can be healing, right? And that's another major underpinning of the work. Our pleasure can heal.
Mhm.
So, what you resist persists, which I know it sounds really trite, but I've in my experience, it's been really true. So my shame's been cropping up, and it has this one specific thing it likes to say to me over and over and over and over. Um, so when I'm going to do this practice, I let that shame speak. It's like, all right, come on, bitch, what do you got for me? And I let her speak, like, have at her, right? Because this is all in my head, right? Like, I can control my thoughts, but I'm not going to shut it down. I'm going to let her speak. So I let her, like, just say all the most horrible, awful things. And then it's like, stop. And then I go to pleasure. And this is vibrator pleasure, to be clear. Like, I'm not I need I need full pleasure in this practice. So then I masturbate for a little bit, I let the pleasure build, and then I pause, and then I go back to the shame. It's like, okay, now what do you have to say? Like, and it just, and so she speaks again, and then I go back to pleasure. I go back to shame, go back to pleasure. And you can do this with any emotion. You can do it with rage, you could do it with jealousy. But the idea is to teach yourself that even like your darkest, worst thoughts can it coexist with your pleasure. Like you are a complex being. It's safe to feel the shame, like, and the anger and the rage and jealousy, whatever it is. Like that's part of being human, and pleasure can always exist beside it. You are always alive. You always have the ability to choose pleasure instead of drowning in that shame or in the anger or whatever emotion is alive for you that day. And it's so, so, so powerful. And I find when I have a shamegasm or a ragegasm, it just turns the volume down on that emotion and it is no longer taking over my thoughts during my, my daily life.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it can, like you said, it can, both things can be true, right? You can feel pleasure, you can feel a multitude of emotions around things. It's not black and white.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what, and when I think of the shamegasm, it's like sometimes like that concept, like that's why makeup sex can be so good, right?
That's what I was
Like
just thinking.
coming, yeah. And the thing too, the other really great thing about the shamegasm is that every time, and that's why it's so important in the practice to go from shame, pleasure, shame, pleasure, shame, pleasure, shame, pleasure. Every time we go into the pleasure, we are making a choice. And that's what makes it so, so powerful. We're choosing to go into the pleasure. And that is a divine choice, right? I'm going to live here instead. And
Yeah.
maybe it's only sustainable for a couple minutes and whatever, but I'm going to choose pleasure over and over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's an intentional
Mhm.
practice.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
And then how do you know, of course, because I'm a psychologist, I'm always thinking like, okay, how do you know that that's like adaptive and helpful rather than avoidant and kind of using that as a pacifier or, right, a way to soothe or cope that could be maladaptive?
I don't know, is soothing. I'm not a psychologist, but I come at it from it's okay to soothe ourselves.
Totally. And I agree with you.
Mhm.
Yes, it's absolutely it's okay, and we should be looking to things that are not harming, right? Not harming someone else, not harming ourselves, that are soothing and help us cope because life's stressful. Shit happens, right?
I mean, when we're doing a practice like that, the guidance is that you don't go let yourself go so deep into the rage or the shame or whatever it is that you take yourself into trauma or wounding. So
Mhm.
you do have to be cognizant of your own tolerance because you don't want to push yourself into that because then yes, that does become harmful. And we don't want people obviously to go into harm. So we do want to stay within the parameters of what feels comfortable. And the idea being that if we get in the practice of doing this, then sometimes we can go like that tolerance, maybe we can grow that tolerance a little tiny bit so we can like get to the bottom of it a little bit better, a little bit more, and eventually get to the point where we release it. But yes, thank you for bringing that up because no, we don't want to push ourselves in any of these practices ever past the point of being comfortable into wounding. We always want to make sure that we can like take ourselves out of it and go do whatever we need to soothe. If it's like have a bath or wrap in a blanket or have a nap. I find I need a nap after my practices often. Like I just want to curl up. So
And a
yes, there
cigarette?
is. I'm sorry,
Cigarette.
A
glass of
nap and
wine.
a cigarette.
Um, yeah. So we definitely we don't want to push past our own boundaries for, going into trauma or wounding. Definitely.
And in that practice where you're going back and forth, does the voice start to diminish? Is my question, right? So is there some reframing that happens with what the voice, the inner critic voice, when you're choosing pleasure? Is there a reframing that happens? I think that's kind of maybe what
Yeah,
you're like, where does it go?
sometimes, yeah, sometimes there is a reframing and sometimes it's this is part of me and I can live with it. It's not going to kill me. Like
Hmm.
I can survive this.
Yeah,
So it depends. Like,
you're deflating it or pulling the power from.
yeah, I don't want to, I don't know that I want to say what my shame monster has been saying directly to me, but
Oh, do share, Jen.
Only if you're
Only if
only
you
if you're
want to.
comfortable, you know?
That's right.
it's,
No pressure.
it, it's been about money lately. So it's been like, wow, you really fucked this all up, didn't you? And then I'm like, yep.
I
And
may have, but look how
and
powerful I am.
Yeah.
and
And I'm
so
human.
and
And
I'm
I'm
human.
human.
So I guess the both for me in this instance, it's concurrently a little bit of a reframing in the sense that it's like, yes, but I did it so that I could become a coach, right? Like
Yeah.
I had to leave my previous job and I was working in film, the strike, so I didn't have that job. So it's
Mm.
like
Hmm.
maybe I did completely fuck things up, but look at where I am. That's where the reframing for me in this instance is. It's like, look at where I am. I'm traveling the world. I get to talk to women and support women in their empowerment, in their sexuality. I'm like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And what's interesting too, when I sometimes zoom out and I think about this, probably well over a year ago when I was, you know, moving into becoming a coach, I said, I didn't say out loud, and I think the universe divine is always listening because I said, I was like, I am willing to go to rock bottom if that's what needed to become a sex and pleasure coach. Like that's how much I want it. I am willing to do that. And so that's part of the reframing too. It's like, did I fuck up or is this what was meant to happen,
That's
what I
right.
needed? Is this actually not a fuck up? Is it propelling me forward? Because part of what's going on in my financial life, I feel that I have become more compassionate as a result. I feel like I have more ability to see past people's status and outward masks, for lack of a better word, because I'm like, I've never been this low in my life and it's okay. And that's the part where it diminishes it. I'm like, it's okay. It's okay for me to be in this financial situation right now where I haven't had a real job in 2 years. It's all okay. So for me, both pieces, the reframing and just the like, I can accept this part of myself, of my journey, are happening concurrently. And every time every time I do a pleasure practice, even if when it's not specifically, a shamegasm, every time I step into a pleasure practice, it's like I am on the right path. It's going to be okay. Everything is fine. Like I'm so joyful to be at this point in my life.
Yeah.
You're
And
you're in alignment is the way that I see it. So
yeah,
Yeah.
you
absolutely.
are
Exactly.
doing what you're passionate about.
That's
Yes.
right.
And sometimes you've got to make great sacrifices and put yourself under a lot of pressure to actually stand true and lean into, right? What is really what's true for you, what
Yeah.
is and you are in alignment, even though it may at times feel like you're not, right?
Yeah.
Because you're like, shit, I've got all these bills. I just spent all this money on all this education
And now
to,
you're going to become a high earner. Tap here. I'm a
yeah,
high,
right.
I'm a
Yeah.
high income woman. Tap here.
So it's a sacrifice and
Yeah.
you're doing what you're passionate about because it's like I can relate to all of what you're saying because there are many points in my career where I'm like, wait, am I making the right decision? Am I investing in the right places? And people will tell you, right? Oh my gosh, you spent that kind of money. You're crazy. You quit your high paying job to go do something that you're not even guaranteed. You don't even know. You're not even educated in that area enough yet to make, a living wage, whatever you people tell you.
That's
It's
right.
like
Right.
you've got to listen to, you have to do what you're passionate about and lean into it and know that everything is going to be fine. There's that invisible safety net and it's always there. So
And I know
that's
that
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know
And
that you know this, but you are a badass and you
thank you.
got this. So
yeah.
if she hasn't told you, and if you don't know and no one has told you lately, we're telling you, you
Yeah.
got this.
And the
Thank you for
work
that.
that you're doing is so valued and so
Yeah.
needed. We need
Yeah.
to really get connected to our bodies, to ourselves, to our sensuality, our sexuality, all of that. It's just,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
So
Yeah.
important.
And it's, and for me too, like it's like, what is the point of living a life where you don't take the risks to live
there isn't.
Yeah.
to live
Uh,
out your desires, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
We have a short,
short life.
right? It's short. It
Window.
feels long, but it's short.
It's short.
Yeah.
Do you,
So
boo.
yeah, you
Totally
keep
do
doing
you.
it and we'll keep you in mind and our listeners hopefully will, those that are sitting there pondering, thinking, you know what, I really could really love up my pussy some more and figure out how to get more
I'm
connected to my
telling you
body,
that we
get
all
connected with
can.
you.
I think that every woman out there should be figuring out how to get to you.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah. Jen, how do they find you?
So, yeah, if anybody listening is interested and wanting to know more, I have the whole touchless orgasm system in a book for just $5, which is on my website. So
Wow.
that's jennwodtke.com. So Jen with two N's, WODTKE.com. So the book is there. Um, the other amazing, super fun thing I'm doing is I am co-hosting a retreat in Tulum at the end of January 25th to, 25th to 30th. That is also on my website. And it's a pussy power retreat where we're just going to go and connect with feminine power. We're going to do touchless orgasm work, some sacred sexuality stuff, some healing, and a midnight moon, full moon ritual on the beach. So gonna be
Sold.
Amazing.
amazing. So check that
Yeah.
out. Check that out as well. It is actually quite affordable. So
Great.
um, highly recommend.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here
Thank
with
you.
us. And thank you all for tuning in today. And we will see you next week, everyone. Take care. Kisses,
Here.
hugs. See you later.
Bye.